Welcome to the Birds and the Bees podcast. This is Braxton Dutson.
That's the key. People aren't talking about it.
Everybody needs to know that porn is not a documentary.
It's not like if we don't talk to kids about sex and sexuality, they're not going to hear about it. They're just not going to hear about it from us.
They have tons of questions, they just don't know how to ask them.
All you have to do is be one chapter ahead. You don't have to know everything. Just one chapter ahead of wherever your child is.
Hey everybody, this is Braxton Dutson, your host of Birds and Bees podcast. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and certified sex therapist from Salt Lake City, Utah. This podcast is meant to bring you information from top professionals in relational and sexual health, and I want you to have all the tools, tips, and tricks you need to improve your relationship with your partner, feel confident in teaching your children about sexual health, and know that none of us are alone in these experiences and we're all growing together. If this is your first time joining us, welcome to the Hive. If you're a longtime Hive mate, welcome back. Great to have you, and we're glad that you're here once again. We're all learning this together, and today I'm so excited to bring you Dr. Jenn. So Dr. Jenn is a therapist and presenter out in California. And what we're going to be talking about today is mindfulness. Now, Dr. Jenn is a mindfulness guru. So I'm really excited to bring this to you. And why are we talking about mindfulness? Because mindfulness has so much to do with sexual health and pleasure. So we cover what mindfulness is, how it differs from meditation, the compassion that you need to have in mindfulness, and what you do when your sex drive drops off. Dr. Jenn does a wonderful job at bringing a lot of these to light, and I'm excited to share this with you because the main misconception that I see as a therapist is that we all think that sexuality is going on in between our legs. No, one of the best places that all this starts is in between our ears, the brain, and mindfulness is how we address that. So I'm really excited to bring you the show today, and I think you're going to get a lot out of it. Thank you for everyone who has even told me that you're sending these episodes to friends, families, colleagues. That means so much to me. I really appreciate all of you and your support in sending out this podcast to those that you know. This means so much to me. Send people a link, send them the podcast, even talking to them about it helps so much. And for those that have been dropping reviews, thank you so much. In fact, Mama Utah wrote this on iTunes. She said, "Love this podcast and all the subjects covered. Great job." Thanks, Mama Utah. Really appreciate your feedback on that. Another 5-star there. And I wanted to share another one. Another 5-star coming from Jimmy Bob Jangles. "This podcast has helped me out so much as a parent to young kids. My anxiety about talking through the subject matter with my kids will likely never disappear. But every episode of Birds and Bees gives me more tools, ideas, etc., for having these talks. In addition, several episodes have been immensely useful to me in my own marriage. I'm sure a better husband for having listened to the content." Thanks, Jimmy Bob Jangles. That means so much to me, and I'm so glad that this content has been helpful for you, as well as you talking to your kids about sexual health. That is the whole reason I'm doing this. This is my passion, and I'm glad that it's supportive for what you're doing within your family, building those relationships. Please leave us more reviews. I love to hear exactly what is being supportive for you and what has been helpful. Again, thank you so much to all those who are listening internationally. Holy cow. Australia has been going through the charts when it comes to listeners, as well as England. Thank you guys. Wonderful. You guys are definitely sharing the word out there about the podcast, and I appreciate you. Remember, you can tune in on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and any other format that you listen to, as well as birdsandbeespodcast.com. You can always send me an email at birdsandbeespodcast@gmail.com. Send me a text or give me a call at 385-449-1818. With all that said, love the interactions that you're giving with me. See me on Instagram, Birds and Bees Podcast. But as for right now, let's go to the interview with Dr. Jenn, Mindfulness and Sexuality. Thank you so much for tuning in. All right, I'm here with Dr. Jenn. Dr. Jenn, thanks so much for being on the show with me.
Oh, I'm so excited when you asked me at the ASECT conference. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, me too. I was really nervous. I was like, oh man, it's Dr. Jenn. She's got so many cool things. Like, maybe she'll be on the show. Thrilled that you're willing to come on and give us your time today with how busy you've been. Like, you've got, I mean, from what I understand, you were just okayed for a book to come out. Is that right?
Yes. Yay. I've been working on this for a long time, and I finally got a publisher for my first book, and negotiated the contract with them, and just signed it last week. So, and actually, I wrote the entire thing. I mean, I started writing it like 5 years ago, and on and off, like every 9 months or something, I'd come back to it and work on it. And then I made myself a year and a half ago. It was part of my sort of intentions for 2016. I made myself finish it by the end of that year. So that was a year and a half ago. And then I worked with an editor on some of it and my proposal, and and started shopping it out to publishers. So
it's already done.
Yes, my entire manuscript's due in a week and a half. So and edit, like, writing's one thing, right? It's hard. Letting alone writing, 240 pages of a book. But then editing, and then editing again, and then re-editing, and getting feedback from different people. And it's just, the editing it's honestly one of my least favorite things to do. It's like, it hurts my brain.
Oh.
It reminds me of when I was working on my dissertation for my PhD. Like, it hurts my brain. So I haven't say I've been in my happy place, but my book is about mindfulness and female sexuality. And the working title right now is From Maddness to Mindfulness, Reinventing Sex for Women.
Wow. And so that may change, but it's the working title right now.
Yeah, I mean, I like the title.
I love
see
it.
what the publisher does with it.
Nice. So
but it is, I mean, it's all around mindfulness. It's about female sexuality, the state of the affairs, and how we're really taught in our society in a lot of ways as women to dislike our bodies, to feel shame and embarrassment, about menstruation, about orgasm, about masturbation, about exploring our pleasure. We're judged for it and slut shamed. And that's what I'm calling madness, because that's madness. We're taught all that. And then as adults, we're supposed to be healthy and happy in our sexuality and free and expressed. And I mean, it's insane. Our brains just don't work like that. Our minds and our hearts don't work like that.
Mm-mm.
So, so I teach basic, very practical mindfulness skills in a strengths-oriented coaching way for folks to really be able to coach themselves and reinvent their sex in a way that feels vulnerable and authentic to them.
That's great. Do you have an idea of, I know the timetables and stuff like that, you've got to turn in here in a week. Do you have an idea of when the prints may be hoping to come out?
Next summer it should be published then, because since I already have and turning the manuscript in, it's often about a year or a little under a year from that point.
Okay. So we're looking summer 2019 then.
Yes.
Nice.
It's so exciting to be able to say that. I haven't really taken that in yet.
Especially if you've been working on it for the past 5 years. Woo.
Yeah, maybe 6. I don't even know. Probably 6.
Wow. Well, I'm excited for that to come out. When it is, I'll have to come back and put it in the show notes for when.
Thank you. That would be awesome.
You can get it. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Dr. Jenn. I mean, you obviously have your doctorate or your PhD, and I mean, what got you to this place?
Yeah, and I take a different route than most folks that end up in the sex field. I mean, so I'm from Pennsylvania. Grew up a good girl in Pennsylvania. Was raised Catholic, followed the rules. Was a good student, played sports. Was in band. Definitely was a late bloomer. And then in college, I went to Lehigh University, and that's where I started taking women's studies classes and became a sexual health peer educator. And became fascinated about gender power dynamics and gender differences around sex and condom use and sexual communication, and just how poorly equipped we all are to have those conversations in meaningful ways, and just became really fascinated about that. So went on and got my PhD in sociology. With a specialty in sex and gender and families, and did more sexual health peer education on that campus at State University in New York at Albany, and helped run the program. So writing curriculum, sexual health curriculum. So I got into the whole field through the sexual health realm. My dissertation had to do with HIV prevention programs targeting adult women around New York State. So sexual health has been my route into things. And then 14, 15 years ago, moved to San Diego from the East Coast. And because I was in search of sun and warmth, and I found it.
Very much so.
And and really started delving into a much more holistic approach and yoga and mind. That's when I was first introduced to mindfulness and meditation and personal transformation classes and just this whole mind, body, spirit connection. Wow. Yeah. And so now, I have my own private practice, my own version of coaching education for individuals and couples, and public speaking's my real passion, traveling around the country, especially around sexual consent and college campuses. But also I do Valentine's events for CEOs and their spouses about erotic play or about building intimacy.
If people want to take one of your classes or one of your courses, are they online courses? Are there some that are online?
So I do. Actually, specifically, one of my specialty areas is desire, women in long-term relationships who have low desire. And that's a point of my book that I cover and address. I have a course specifically for women on that. It's 14 short videos with tons of it's basically like you're getting like 5 sessions with me.
Wow.
All piled into this video series, and you could do it at your own pace. I think it's important for women to sit down with their partners too and do it so you can really talk through all these topics. And it's a lot of exercises in mindfulness and sensuality and body image and communication and really getting to the heart of desire. So that one's online. And there also is one through Sex Coach U about mindfulness. I'm a faculty member for them on mindfulness and sex. And also for sex coaching. So
so they can go to the sexcoachu. Is it org?
It's actually it's all on my website. Oh, sorry,
this is all on your
first
website.
Question.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all through my hub, drjensden.com.
Dr. Jenn, Jenn?
Yeah, S.
Oh, Dr. Jen's Den, Den.
Yeah.
And that's a dot
I came up with the name before we knew you shouldn't come up with complicated names. This was a long time ago. I created my website name.
I like it. Dr. Jen's Den.
Jen's Den, yeah.
And is that that's a .com?
Yes.
Okay. We'll also have that up on, for the listeners, we'll have that on the show notes so you can just click on it versus have to spell it out. We'll get you to the right place. Well, cool. So we're talking today about mindfulness. We're talking about mindfulness, sexuality, maybe bringing desire back in. Tell me, how does mindfulness actually affect your sexuality?
Well, first, let me just do a brief definition of mindfulness.
Oh, yeah, great
mindfulness at its core is 2 basic factors. One is presence in the moment. So noticing what's happening in this moment. Versus, so often we're rehashing the past or we're projecting into the future or worried about the future. And all of our, what we call our mind chatter or our monkey mind is constantly going. And mindfulness is about not really quieting that, but noticing that and then just noticing your surroundings and what's going on for you. And like noticing those thoughts, but not getting carried away by those thoughts. So mindfulness is about presence in the moment with whatever's showing up. And that noticing. And the second piece of it is not judging what you notice.
Not judging.
And that's important. So, because, I'd say and I call that like compassion, having compassion for yourself in the moment. Because often non-judgment, it's sort of hard what to do. So I'm like, just have a gentleness towards yourself or just have a kindness towards yourself. And don't, if you notice something that you don't like about yourself, don't beat yourself up for it. Just observe. Just observe what's going on.
Nice. And what would you say the difference between mindfulness and meditation are?
Yeah, it's a great question. So mindfulness is at its core what I just said. And so it's noticing when you're distracted and choosing to bring yourself back to the moment and focusing on whatever you're choosing to focus on, which could be your breath, which could be looking at a candle, which could be, I guide folks through 5 senses exercise. So maybe it's your sense of hearing and you notice you're distracted and then you catch yourself and you bring yourself back and you're like, oh yeah, what am I hearing? So it's choosing what you want to focus on, noticing when you're distracted and just bringing yourself back, and not judging yourself for it over and over again. And it trains this, executive functioning prefrontal cortex part of our brain. Meditation, it tends to be a more formal practice. So it could be sitting down and doing something like this. You could be doing a mindful meditation practice where you're sitting down on a cushion. You're choosing just to focus on your breath. And when you're distracted, you bring yourself back. So in that moment, they would be very similar. Meditation, though, could also be a walking meditation. And it's just, picking up your foot and, putting it down really slowly. I did this once with like 100 people at 5 a.m. at the top of a hilltop at a Thich Nhat Hanh retreat back in 2005. And we looked like a bunch of zombies walking up the hill. And that was when I was a little fresher and newer to mindfulness. And I'm like, what is this BS that we're doing at 5 a.m.? Right. But that is actually a beautiful part of mindfulness there, that as I'm doing this walking meditation, I'm noticing that I'm irritated and just noticing that and not attaching meaning to it or value to it, just noticing that. Yeah. And then choosing to bring my focus back to whatever I'm, working on. So meditation can also look a lot of different ways. You could do guided visual meditations that, folks are having you visualize something. So in general, meditation to me is a more formal practice that you're putting like a time limit around and you're focusing, and that's, all you're doing. Mindfulness is a part of that. The way I teach mindfulness is very practical applications, though, as you're moving through every day and as you're interacting with your partner or you're in a sexual situation. How do you apply mindfulness so that you can break your patterns and do something different?
So even right now, as you and I are talking, you and I can both be mindful of being in the space versus our minds leaving or noticing our breath. We can be mindful and still carry on a meaningful conversation together.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's so funny. I've never done this in a session though, but like there's so many things that happen, right? Oh yeah. I could be thinking, I could take a sip of my tea and I'd be like, oh, this tea's really good. I should buy more of this. And I'm like, oh, let me bring myself back to this, Or I could be like, oh, my hair looks wild that I could see in the screen. I'm like, maybe it is time to wash my ocean hair, and then, oh, wait, let me bring myself back. I'd be like, oh, I think I said too many times. And I was like, oh, bring myself back. Yes. We are distracted by so many different things in any moment. And it's just acknowledging it and then choosing to bring back and be like, no, let me focus on this person in front of me and in our connection here.
Yeah. And so you're saying using this piece where we can stay, oh, my mind's going off this way, or we're naturally just distracted in so many ways. Being able to do this in a sexual setting or a sexual health setting. We're talking whether it's during active sex or even prior to, what you think about it. Tell me a little bit about the ways that female body individuals can better experience this.
Well, let me give you a general, because you had asked before. I went into the definition of mindfulness, just how do we even apply, how does this affect our sexuality? And I think, and you just said it right there. I think there's tons of ways to do it, but two in particular I think are easier for folks to wrap their heads around. One is in the act of a sexual interaction, being able to recognize when you're distracted, recognize if you're caught in my penis might not be hard enough, and noticing that anxiety, acknowledging it and choosing to bring yourself back to the moment, the connection, your five senses. Or like, oh gosh, oh, my thighs look terrible at this angle. Oh my God, look at my belly. I shouldn't have eaten that burrito tonight, and you're like totally then disconnected with well, I'm in San Diego. We eat burritos here a lot. It's a lot of burrito eating here. It's a lot of bloating after burrito eating here. and being able to know like, okay, no, my mind's just doing that thing again. I'm choosing to be in this moment and share myself with this person, let me bring my focus back here. So like in the moment in sexual situations, we could train ourselves to be mindful. And that's, in some ways, maybe the more obvious one. The second piece that I think is particularly powerful for me as a sociologist is we are trained so much BS around sex and our body. What I was talking in the beginning about my book and why I'm writing my book for women. And so all of like the negative messages that we get around sex and the shame and the fear and the embarrassment, and the self-judgment and the stigma, that's wired into us. That lives in us. And that interferes so much with our ability to even have sexual conversations with a partner, to explore our needs, to know our needs, to feel like we can articulate them, to even be open to trying a vibrator. All of those things get patterned into us and shut us down around a lot of aspects of sexuality, and which gets in the way of our intimacy and our close connection, let alone pleasure. Mm-hmm. And so mindfulness, training in mindfulness of paying attention to your thoughts and your emotions and literally your visceral sensations, because like shame is a really heavy visceral sensation. Yeah,
definitely.
Which when we feel that, we just want to shut it down and want nothing to do with it. Well, through mindfulness training, we can train ourselves to stay present with that discomfort. Mm-hmm. And once we realize, this feels pretty bad, but I can breathe through this, I can do this, we start getting really empowered. And then we can choose to stay or have conversations and stay present in difficult, uncomfortable circumstances to a new level. We're building resiliency.
Yeah.
And then we could start engaging in a new depth of vulnerability and authenticity around our sexuality.
Wow. So when we can stay mindful with that, we're able to address really what's at the core of building that visceral shame that you experience and questioning what's going on. Oh, that's tough.
With kindness to ourselves, right? And that's the accepting what shows up and not judging ourselves and being kind, because it's really hard.
Yeah. Significantly having that compassion on yourself, like, this is really difficult. Or, yes, I did eat that burrito and I'm not happy with all these things, but right now I want to be with my partner.
This is right. This is where I choose to be. Yeah. So I can't change anything else right now. And so let me enjoy this.
Yeah.
So then you asked specifically about folks that identify as women and around women's desire.
Yeah, around their desire. You also spoke about men too, so I'm curious about both of those. But let's take it as it comes.
Well, and female sexuality is one of my specialty areas. So there's a couple things about how mindfulness can help with desire. One is desire is very. I think often at the beginning of a relationship, desire comes easily, and it's the neurochemicals, and it's a cocktail, and it's like it hits us, but we have no training or understanding of what to do. Often, after 8 months to 3 years or something, if you're in a long-term relationship, it's really common physiologically for that to drop off. And so once it's not there sort of like naturally, that you're not feeling this horniness or this yearning, what can you do? And most of us are just at a loss, because it's like, hunger went away. Well, what do I do? But we know we still need to eat food, but like, we don't actually need sex to stay alive. So, one thing mindfulness can do, mindfulness is about paying attention to the nuances of what's going on for us. And desire has a lot of subtleties to it, of a little, a little tingling in my crotch, or a little, flutter in my chest. Or like, I'm ovulating, I'm paying attention to my menstrual cycle when I'm ovulating. And I was like, I do feel a little randy right now, and what that feels like. And so paying attention to or a little bit of, because the research studies show over and over again, as women, we don't have a good mental connection to physiologically what our genitals are doing. So even when we're getting wet, sometimes we don't know it. We don't necessarily have good receptors. We can't tell. Or even if we're getting greater blood flow, if mentally we're not turned on, or if mentally we don't like our surroundings or what we're watching, we're like, no, not turned on at all. Well, our body still maybe. And so through mindfulness and that intentional awareness of physiological nuances, we can learn to train and to attune to that, and to be like, oh no, my body's still, is still doing that. It's just at a more subtle level.
Yeah.
And so that can be powerful. I think also what I said before, there's a lot of ways that our societal teachings and our negative body image get in the way of us feeling comfortable exploring our bodies, and being open to trying new things. And frankly, for most long-term relationships, if they're going to have, a healthy, active sex life, you're going to have to think outside the box, and be creative. And mindfulness can help us get over our hangups and fears around that, again, by sitting with the discomfort of it, really identifying what is going on for me here. And, where can I dig deep and find some courage to move through and try some new things that feel right to me.
So the new things may be something that, maybe you've got the message that good girls don't do a certain sexual thing, or that they, you don't get turned on by a certain aspect of somebody, that, if you're, say that you enjoy feet or something like that, and you're telling yourself that this is not, I shouldn't be doing that. I don't want to be a person with a foot fetish, quote unquote. Then that can be a turnoff for yourself. Or if you're like, I just don't want to feel like I'm a whore and want sex all the time, or I'm judging myself because I really don't right now and I feel like I should, and all these things can really affect how we judge
ourselves for everything. Aspect of it. Yeah, and we're taught to.
Yeah.
And then we think we're broken.
Yeah.
So this is about just shining a light on whatever is and accepting it and being like, okay, what could I try differently? But we have to be willing to try it. We have to put ourselves out there if we want things to change. And that takes a lot of courage, and it's really uncomfortable. So, like I said, through mindfulness, we learn to gain skills with sitting with that discomfort. So we could start to make different choices.
Gotcha. So if people want to bring mindfulness into their relationship, I mean, as you've said, a person may be like, I need to be more mindful, and they're in partnered sexual experiences. Are there ways to bring that in as a couple? Are there ways to do this on an individual level if people don't want to talk to their partner about it? Although I think I highly encourage talking to your partner about trying to be mindful.
Yeah.
What are some ways that couples can use mindfulness together, or bring that into their experience?
Yeah, one of the most basic tools that I use is a triangle of awareness. And I adapted it from, there's these, if anybody really wants to dive into mindfulness, there's really great courses called mindfulness-based stress reduction classes. They're 8-week classes. Like here at UCSD in San Diego, they teach them. I know some psychologists teach their own classes, but it's a really, and the course has been around. John Kabat-Zinn is the one that created these, like in the late 70s. And from that course, they had a triangle that they taught us, and I've adapted it to my work because I was already using something along those lines, but it's nice to have a triangle to look at. And so at the top of so the idea of it is, at any moment, say, for example, that you're feeling stuck with something around sex or with your partner, or you don't know how to communicate, or you notice that you're lashing out at your partner, or you're shutting down, or you want to go numb yourself, or you just went and did 3 shots of tequila, or you're smoking pot, or you just spent the last hour on Instagram feed, like all of these things that we do to run, numb, distract, or, lash out or shut down. We have all these patterns in place.
Yeah.
Well, those are what get in the way of the type of connected intimacy that we're most looking for, with our partners and with our friends, and just sort of a really meaningful life. And so this triangle of awareness can help us check in, like, what's going on in this moment? Or what triggered me that made me go off on one of these patterns? And so at the top of the triangle is thoughts, which is just checking in. What are my thoughts? What are my beliefs? What meaning does this have for me? And then on one side of the bottom is emotions. Like, am I feeling sad, hurt, disappointed, scared, frustrated, humiliated, ashamed? And I often give folks a list of emotions just so they can really see what's going on. And then on the other side, which I think is really powerful, is viscerally, where is this showing up in terms of bodily sensations? Like, are you feeling that prickly feeling of anxiety in your chest, or that sinking feeling when you get bad news, or that nauseous feeling when you think your partner's cheating on you, or getting warm all over, or a kind of a buzzy headed feeling, or is your heart pounding. Like our body has so much wisdom that it gives us, like, and so quickly. Like our visceral responses are quicker than our mind's awareness and our awareness of what's going on often, especially with things like shame or humiliation or fear. They're just so quick, and that's programmed into us to protect us. And so it's all in this triangle, and it all just feeds off of each other. You have a thought, and then you feel it, and then it goes back to another thought, and into the emotion. It's about, and all of that happens in like half a second, and then you're off to the races with whatever pattern you have, to not have to feel the ickiness of all of that. And so with mindfulness and just using a simple tool like that, if your partner say I have a partner and I identify as heterosexual. So say you have a boyfriend that comes up to me and we've been dating for 4 years, and after, about a year and a half or so, and this is actually, kind of one of my patterns, after about a year and a half or something in a relationship, my desire definitely drops. But it doesn't mean I don't love my partner, doesn't mean I'm not attracted to them, doesn't mean we have great respect and communication, all these other things. Physiologically, I just notice a big change. And so say that's happened and we're like 4 years in, and my partner brings up, so it's been a few months since we've had sex.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, I want to be like, effing leave me alone. I'm, writing my book. Do you not see I have this manuscript due in a week and a half?
Leave me alone.
What's wrong with you? And it's been 90 degrees and humid in San Diego. We never have that. Like, who feels like, I could do all of these things.
Yeah, definitely.
And to push my partner away. And so what's beneath all of that, say if I was to use the triangle in that moment, and I work really hard to practice what I preach, and I do all of these things in my relationships. I would sit in that moment and be like, all right, I notice that I'm thinking, and I'll point to the triangle. I've noticed that I'm thinking you're being totally selfish. And I'm like, and I, in my bodily sensations, I can feel my heart pounding right now. And emotionally, I actually feel anger. And then I realize I'm thinking, oh my God, he's right. It's been that long, and I didn't even know it's been that long. And then I bounce back to the emotion piece, and I'm like, and I feel bad, and I feel guilty. And I feel like I'm disappointing you. And then I'm like, and then that makes me sad inside. And I'm like, I kind of feel that, in my solar plexus, and I could feel it down in my belly a little bit, and a little heaviness in my chest. And then I feel, and then my thought is, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
We tried this and we tried this, and then I feel a little hopeless. And then I realize that I just want to ignore you and go back to my work, whatever. So, all of those things are beneath my anger, and often our anger or our shutting down, like that's all we see. And that shuts down our ability to have really meaningful conversations. And so in that moment, by using the triangle and being really vulnerable, and here's the thing, I was totally making, this scenario. Well, it's based on some real scenarios. I haven't had an exact scenario. I could feel it as I was saying it. I was like, okay, and then where would I feel that? Oh, I'd probably feel it here. I was like, oh, that does feel good.
No.
And it was like really, it's very vulnerable to do that. And so, I mean, you need to make sure your partner's going to respect your vulnerability. So first of all, you need to know that you're both committed to doing this with each other. But, if you do something like that in a moment like that, very likely my partner would be, well, that sucks. I didn't mean to make you feel all those things. Like, I'm so sorry you feel those things. And then I'd be like, all right, so what's going on with you in the triangle? And he'd be like, well, I was feeling horny and I feel it in my crotch, and I miss you. And because my love language and filling my love tank is through sex and sexual connection and doing that with you. And so, and I realize I'm feeling lonely, and then it makes me feel a little rejected, and then he could do his own thing. And then really you got to the heart of what's going on in that moment for both of you, the meaning that it has to you, the heavy emotions behind it. And then instead of being a wedge between you, all of a sudden you have this beautiful vulnerability moment and that's intimacy. That's real, raw intimacy there. And then you could be like, okay, so what can we do? And like, frankly, you have a conversation like that, you're going to feel more connected to your partner.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd be like, well, let's just go lay naked and touch each other a little bit and see, if something kicks in. Like, it gives you a pathway to doing something different instead of, making you farther apart with your partner.
Well, and I love that vulnerability you're talking about when in this situation, your partner's coming up to you saying, hey, we haven't had sex. And the immediate reaction is, whoa, hold the phone. I'm going to find all the ways am I being attacked? I don't know. I've got all these things going on. And so your immediate reaction is to hopefully put up defenses so that you don't get hurt. And then as you break those defenses down and they're continuing, you can build that trust that your partner's not attacking. All of a sudden the understanding is, holy cow, yeah, you have been writing this manuscript and you do want to be with me. And that was what I was really worried about. And I want to be with you. And can we, you're still writing right now. And then you get to move into what you were saying, that connection of, well, how about we meet up in an hour? Or, you know what, let's plan on tomorrow. Or you can put down some very time sensitive, this is what we're going to do to help get us out of this new space that we're in. We want to do something different. Great. We've been in a relationship for a while. We can try different things, and we're going to constantly have to be rechecking in. And I think that's something that a lot of couples, and especially from these media and the messages we get in our relationships, is that if you don't have your relationship perfect, then there's something wrong and you're in big trouble. And especially for women, you're supposed to take care of your man, or you're supposed to take care of your partner, and you're supposed to do all these things. And if you're not, then all of a sudden that defensiveness comes up and your visceral reactions are happening on both sides. And it can cause a huge wedge, like you were saying. And I love that the opposite of that wedge is more of that connection.
Yeah. And it's scary to go to that place. There's a reason that, vulnerability, most people think that means weakness, and it's a bad thing, but all it means is that your defenses are down. You've taken your armor off. And in a military situation, that may not be so good, but in an intimate situation, it's amazing. But again, we need to know it's going to be honored by our partners.
Yeah.
We need to know that both folks are working on it. We're not perfect. We all mess up, and,
yeah.
was in some interaction recently, actually with an ex-boyfriend of mine who's a good friend. And I stood back how I handled that. And I was like, oh, you were not mindful or compassionate at all with that, Jen. I was like, might want to do that differently. And I feel, and when you do it differently, you feel better about yourself and you get a better result, frankly.
Yeah.
If our point of communication is to feel heard and understood and get on the same page with folks, being able to do that mindfully and responsibly and take ownership for what's going on for us, really is just strategically more effective as well.
Very much so. And I'm certified as a mind-body bridging therapist, and that's one component of mindfulness, or uses a very big part of mindfulness in there. And I think one of the hardest things, or one of the newest parts of this, is noticing that visceral reaction that you were talking about. Is because that, for most people, we say, well, what's going on in your body? It's like, oh, nothing. Because a lot of the time we're living in that situation of a tight stomach or tight arms or flexed muscles, that it's become so normal for us that we're like, oh yeah, no, this is just how my body feels. And that in of itself is recognizing, whoa, I can relax that part of me.
Yeah.
Oh, this is my defense reaction to when I'm feeling defensive. And you can change, just like what you were saying. Oh, I did something different in this situation, and my arm was flexed, or I had a clenched fist, and that's a really good sign to me that I'm going down that same path. And then you can start changing things, just being compassionate. Oh, I'm flexed again. Deep breath, and I'm back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, if you're raised male in our society, part of masculinity is to detach from all of that.
Oh, yeah.
To not be in touch, because with the triangle, the thoughts and beliefs are at the top. And, sometimes when I'm teaching this to men, I just draw a line under that. I'm like, this is all you've been allowed. I'm like, that doesn't mean the emotions aren't there and the bodily sensations aren't there. You've just been taught to not pay attention to them. And that, frankly, they were a weakness, or, and you were going to be ridiculed for them or shamed for having them. So you just shut them down. But I'm like, that just means they're running the show from under the surface.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're not there. It just means, it drives me crazy when in business situations or corporate situations, and they're like, oh, we make logical decisions here. I'm like, that's BS. I'm like, decisions are totally made from ego and self-worth and self-esteem and who likes who and what makes you feel good and your mood that day and all these other things like emotions and your visceral sensations and all the training that you have from childhood is all there running the show. And I'm like, and mindfulness is how we shine a bright light on it. So we could be more conscious of it. We could be more responsible with it. And then in the long run, we could be happier and feel like we're not sabotaging ourselves.
Oh, most definitely. And I love that you're pointing out that it is just because you don't notice it doesn't mean it's not there.
Oh, and that's an interesting conversation. Because I tend to work with a lot of men who like run their own companies or they're, doctors or lawyers or engineers or, and they're like, their strength is their logical brain. And I was like, I'm just going to say you're getting in your own way. Just saying. There might be things that you don't know that's going on. Mm-hmm. And and if I'm asking a question of like, well, why did you do that? Or why did you say that? Or, your wife said this and, how come you didn't do anything? Their answer usually is, I don't know. And I'm like, you can learn why. Yeah. You can figure out, or at least, have a better idea of your wiring, and then you'd be able to predict your behavior. Be like, oh, right, I'm wired this way. Oh, right, that's my default here. Okay, let me choose to do something different then. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to be learned in mindfulness. As much as it sounds like a simple concept, it is a practice.
Yeah, and we're only scratching the surface,
yes.
Compared to like Pema Chodron is one of my favorite. She's a Buddhist nun and an author and a speaker, and she's just incredible. I mean, her stuff is all about really beneath mindfulness and like Buddhism and human happiness is that we all struggle to accept the basic premise and truth of life is that things are constantly changing and nothing's permanent. Mm-hmm. And, we like to believe things are permanent and that gives us, reduces our anxiety, but that also keeps us stuck in a box. And so, underneath all of that is being able to accept groundlessness and constant change and impermanence of things. And that's, freaking hard.
Yeah.
I'll be like, oh, I'm doing well. And then I'll pick up one of her books and read a chapter. And I was like, oh, I am doing that exact thing you're saying right there. Yes. And I didn't even know I was doing it. And then I was like, well, isn't that humorous?
Mm-hmm. And it is so hard. Again, it blows me away how much society, and we're talking from parents or anything, but vast media about how good relationships never change. And they have this perfect part to them, and if you have a great sex life, like you're just gonna be you're gonna have great sex all the time. And if you don't, then it's like, you know what, cut the cords and find someone that you're really sexually compatible with. And there's no room for, well, you could start out really great and then life happens and all of a sudden it's not so great and you can get back to where you want it to be. And if you've never had it the way you want to, there's ways to work together to do this, whether in therapy or in practicing what you've been talking about. Yeah. But it is gonna change.
I mean, we're constantly, we have this sense of, this coherent sense of self, but it's fabricated. I mean, and I get it. It helps us, gives a sense of identity and stability, but it doesn't actually exist on its own. It's constantly being created, and that's really hard to wrap our brains around. And I have moments of like, I get it, and then an hour later, I was like, what was that thing I just got?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I do, I approach mindfulness, like I said, in a really practical way, because I don't want it to be this esoteric thing that so many people think is too hard to attain, or I can never stop my thoughts. I suck at mindfulness. I suck at meditation. It's not about that. It's about the continual, it's a commitment to a continual gentle noticing.
Yeah.
And I say the gentle part because that's like the kindness and, to ourselves, and just being in that process and knowing sometimes it's going to be really hard, and knowing sometimes it's okay to give yourself a break. But underneath it, I mean, there's just a richness of philosophy really based in a lot of really great human psychology and what we're learning about neuroscience. A lot of mindfulness is really backed up by a lot of science now and a lot of psychological theories.
Yeah, so as you're talking about the being gentle and kind with yourself, one of the things that comes to mind, and that I work with people a lot when in their sexuality and trying to bring mindfulness into sexual practice or in connection with a partner, tend to find that these rough words, shoulds come up. Where if one person is thinking, as they're engaging in sexual activity with their partner, they're like, oh, gosh, what do we have to do right after this? Or, we've got to go pick up broccoli and bread. I need to put that on the
definitely mustard.
Definitely mustard. Especially with me doing my world record attempt.
Can never have enough.
Never have enough of that. Never have enough of that. This will air after I attempt that, but I'll report on the next episode if I actually win the world record of drinking mustard. But yeah, picking up mustard, or I've got to go visit my friend, or I wonder what we're going to do after this. Is my body okay? Is when you're in your mind like that, that's a great time to recognize, like, well, okay, I'm not being as present, and I can feel their skin or the temperature or what the sheets feel like, or being in the sexual experience. One of the pitfalls I see the most tends to be, I'm doing a laundry list again. I'm not present. Why am I not present? Okay, be present. Be present, Braxton. Come on, be present right now. Let's do this. Let's be present. And in of itself, it's then taking me out of, like, why am I so not present right now?
Oh, it's great. It's like militant mindfulness.
Yes, militant mindfulness. Do this now.
That could be like a hardcore beach boot camp class, militant mindfulness.
Yep, militant mindfulness. And it's not helping so much.
So, yeah, I mean, which is, I think... So, what happened in that moment? So you're, like you said, you're in a sexual encounter and you notice you're making your grocery list in your head and you're distracted. And then you catch yourself and you're like, I should be present here. And then you're beating yourself up for it. And so that, again, is why I think that second piece of mindfulness is so important. It's about not judging what you noticed, not attaching value to it. And that is so hard because we as humans, we attach meaning and value to everything. Mm-hmm. And that keeps us in a constant state of like and dislike versus just sort of a more neutral, accepting, observing way of moving through the world, of just noticing. When we have noticing, we have a whole lot more freedom. But we're stuck into attaching value to things. So in a moment like that, just be like, I was doing my grocery list again. One thing is to acknowledge what you were doing and then thank yourself. Because there's your brain went there. Either your brain went there because our brains are just random and did that, or because that has some value to you. You're like, oh, right, I have a responsibility to my family to go grocery shopping and get healthy food in the house. Like, that's a good thing, Yeah. And so notice that, acknowledge yourself like, oh, right, okay, in 20 minutes, I will get back and do that list. Right now, though, thank you, but I'm going to choose to bring my focus back to this. So actually having an internal dialogue with yourself, instead of beating yourself up, you actually thank yourself. Like, that is a total paradigm shift than mostly what we do. And basically, instead of viewing your mind and your body as the enemy, you're viewing it as a friend. I mean, and so anytime and even if we have an illness, and you're viewing it as an enemy, or cancer as an enemy, like, you're fighting your body versus like working, in an integrated, balanced, harmonious way. And I think that's always to our benefit and a healthier approach when we befriend ourselves and accept all aspects of ourselves, even when we don't like it, and with kindness, and then be like, okay, now I can move forward. Because otherwise you just get caught in those downward spirals. So thanking yourself and then choosing to bring your focus back and then 3 seconds later, you're off to the races doing something else. You notice that, you acknowledge it, and then you bring yourself back. So there's no shoulds. There's just exactly what is in this moment. And you realize it can't be any other way than the way it is. And the more that we're willing to accept that with compassion towards ourselves, that's where we then actually get to retrain our brains so that we are doing things that we feel better about and feel healthier and feel more connected.
Definitely. I think
But it's kind of counterintuitive because we think we need to beat ourselves up for change. But like rejection doesn't lead to compassion. Only compassion leads to compassion. And that's what creates change.
Yeah, we definitely think that the beating ourselves up, if I'm nice to myself, then I'll just keep doing the same thing over and over again. When in reality, we beat ourselves up, and that does create the repetition because it hurts. I mean, these shoulds are great trigger words to start recognizing as you're beginning to practice this mindfulness. Oh, there's a should. How can I thank myself? How can I thank myself for doing something? Good. And so, what are some of the other places or ways that we can apply mindfulness in our life?
Yeah, well, body image is a big one.
Oh,
and
man.
I've mentioned that a couple times before. Particularly as women. There's a great quote I was just putting in my book, and it's from the great health book, Our Bodies, Ourselves, for women. And it's actually, I think it's in like the opening paragraphs of the textbook. But it's saying, you know, as if you're assigned a female at birth, it means we're kind of entered into a beauty pageant from birth, one that we never signed up for. And that we're constantly being judged or assessed for our appearance. And that's hard because then we learn from a young age that that's what our value and our worth is. You know, how pretty we are, how attractive we are to others, you know, and then tied with being a good girl and being nice and being a pleaser. And then as we get older and go through puberty, then it's tied to getting sexual attention. And that you get energy and power and attention, and that feels good because you feel more valuable and more worthy, and folks treat you better to some extent. You know, but it's not. It's like our worth is all decided by others, and we're all in aging bodies, and that's always constantly changing. And so that means it's just setting us up for hating ourselves and feeling like we're always failing because we're always getting older, or we didn't get a good night's sleep, and you're always gaining weight, your metabolism's slowing down, or you're African American, or you're disabled, or you're you know, you're too thin, or you're too fat, or your skin is too freckly, or a million other things that aren't the perfect image. And so it's set up to make us spend a lot of money at this point on you know, beauty, billion dollar beauty industry. And so to recognize that we're set up to fail, we're set up to dislike ourselves. And like I said, disliking any part of ourselves means that we're constantly at battle, and it's not a healthy place to be mentally or physically. And so to use mindfulness to catch ourselves when we're judging ourselves or comparing ourselves to other women or other people or how we used to be. And, you know, acknowledging again, like that same, like, okay, I see you. Thanking for those thoughts, because those thoughts are there to protect us in some way. They want to protect us from social embarrassment or shame. They want to protect us from not feeling worthy enough, in some backwards way. And so acknowledging them, being like, you know what, I'm going to choose though to focus on the fact that, you know, I got out of bed this morning and I have 2 strong legs that bike me around town, and you know, my hair is crazy and wild after it goes in the ocean, and I have these natural waves and I like them. And, you know, a quirky way that I smile when I'm saying something vulnerable that I'm doing right now. All of these little nuances that make us unique and special, and really choosing to focus on those. So with mindfulness, we can choose to reframe a really negative frame that's been taught to us and programmed into us. And we could slowly desocialize us and choose, you know, put our attention and intention in other areas and focusing on our strengths and what to be positive about. You know, I was just using this analogy recently of, and I just wrote this into my book, about like, if we watched this movie of this girl that was like 8 years old till age 90. And at 8 years old, she started dieting for the first time. And judging her body and disliking it, all the way up until, her deathbed at 90. She struggles with body image. But this woman was like a scientist, and she made discoveries, and she was a philanthropist and was kind to people. And like, we were watching this movie, and she's getting achievements, and she's having close connections with others, and she's kind. But this whole time behind the scenes, she's hating her body and judging herself for how she looks in a dress as she's accepting an award. It would be so heart-wrenching to watch this movie. We'd be yelling at the screen, "You are so amazing. You are so beautiful. You are so worthy." It's not about that. But that's what most women, that's what we do our entire lives. Mm-hmm. No matter what we achieve, there's a lack of worthiness about our appearance in some way or another. And it's heart-wrenching. So
it makes me sick to see the $1 billion industry that we're talking about, that these age-defying creams or whatever it is, that you were literally given the task to defy what your body is supposed to do. You were supposed to stay 20 in your 20s your entire life into, as you're 60, 70, like, be ageless and youthful. And wow, you're harnessed with an impossible task, and it turns my heart that's what it's become, and that we're put in that place to do this, and your entire focus is to be something that you can't be, and therefore you're never able to be completely within your body or within yourself, because there's always
really
something you're supposed to be.
And social media is definitely making it.
Oh my heavens!
Much worse. I mean, I watch myself. I was scanning through somebody's Instagram feed recently, and I was like, "Don't click on the bikini shots. Stop clicking on the bikini shots, Gonzalez." And I was like, "Why are you doing that? You're constantly comparing." I'm like, "Stop doing that to yourself." Mm-hmm. So, and I know better. I totally know better, but it's still like wired in me. And then that's our whole media plays into that.
Yeah.
It's insidious. I use the word insidious because it really is. It like lives in us at the deepest levels. And as I practice what I preach, and I work with mindfulness, and this is an area I still struggle with. I'm way better than I was before. And thank goodness I'm 45 and I'm perimenopausal and my body keeps changing whether I want it to or not. Uh-huh. And, I keep chipping away at it and being like, this is what I got. I have a lot to be happy for. And keep refocusing on that. So, but I live in San Diego. I live in a beach town. Like, Southern California is its own thing, and it's definitely harder. It infiltrates the psyche at some deeper levels here. So,
well, and you're not alone. I'm in the same situations when it comes to a lot of those, what you compare yourself to, how body changes what you're supposed to look like. And I would venture out to say that we're all in the same boat, men, women, anywhere along these lines, that we all have things that if we were to ask someone, what don't you like about yourself? Bam. Super easy. Super easy.
Yeah. And there's been, I'd say in the past couple decades, for men overall, there's been a greater emphasis on men's appearance and through social media, also in media, and, having the abs and the broad shoulders and the perfect hair and not losing your hair and all different aspects of that. So there's greater emphasis for men on that too. And certainly in the gay community, for gay men, there's been, an ongoing emphasis around that and body image concerns. And then, with the accompanying eating disorders and all. So,
and penis size and everything you get to compare yourself to with that. Yeah, that's where we moving into a different topic of just body image and all that stuff. But at the same time, this is so real.
Yes.
And one of the last questions I had for you was, giving us, an exercise that we could use at home. I think we've been covering on this entire time together, like how to do this at home. Do you want to, maybe not even just walk us through one, but maybe just some steps of what you can do. And I think we've been doing that throughout the entire time anyway.
Yeah,
so.
But I can give, the triangle exercise, to write down your own triangle would be helpful. But there's also use technology to your advantage. While it often distracts us and interferes with intimacy, there's mindfulness bell apps And I have an Android, and there's a really great free one that I've had for years, and it's amazing. It's set to go off randomly every few hours when my sound's off now, but when my sound is on. And I pause. If I'm not driving, I close my eyes and I take 3 deep breaths, and I check in, like, what's happening in the moment. And am I carrying tension in my body? Can I relax that? Am I feeling like frantic and anxious? Like, those are am I kind of spinning too fast and taking a few deep breaths and bringing me back down? I just check in. And again, I don't judge what I notice. I just check in. It's sort of it's like a real quick body scan for myself of, like, what's going on for me physically, emotionally, viscerally right now. It's super helpful because I've had to go off at 11 o'clock at night, and I'll be on, like, researching something, and I pause and I do it. And then I open my eyes, I look at the computer. I'm like, why the hell am I doing this? Go to bed. Like, you don't need to be doing this right now. And so it really is, it's a pause to assess, like, in that moment, what's healthiest for me, and just, feeling more in harmony, with what's going on and what's nurturing to myself. So, getting a mindfulness bell app like that. I also have a mindfulness bell that sits on my coffee table. I use it in all my workshops. I used it at the ASECT conference when I was the mistress of ceremonies to get the whole 700 people quieted down.
It worked well.
Yeah, because it's a really nice, it's just a nice sound. It gets your attention. It kind of pierces the air. And I've had some families get mindfulness bells. And when somebody notices that somebody's getting, like, if somebody's raising their voice or somebody, because I've had, like, 8-year-old kids be like, Mommy, I think you need this right now. And they walk up and they ring the bell, and she's like, oh my God, he was so right. And she's like, all right, let's close our eyes and take a few deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, you can also have an 8-year-old that's, like, ringing it incessantly. And that would be kind of annoying. So you might want to put it in a higher place depending on your children, but even just as a couple to use that, to be like, hey, we were having a discussion and now we're having an argument. Let's pause for a moment, and you ring a bell, you take 3 deep breaths, and it's just, you get to reset.
Yeah.
So, but using it through technology that it goes off at random times where it's literally interrupting your day and your thoughts is amazing, because we often don't. You'd be like, nope, what I'm doing is too important. And you'd be like, oh, well, no, that's interesting.
Yes,
Now I'm going to make myself pause. So that's my main kind of easiest suggestion, just to start getting more attuned and aware.
Love it. And I also love if you, as you do the bells, but also having something that, the one I think is interesting the most is taking a shower. A mindful shower is so hard to do.
So hard. I know. Because that's where we think and do creative work or whatever.
There's literally nothing you can do in there, but it's like, this is my creative space. And heaven forbid you be able to hear the water go down the drain or feel it on your body or mess with the temperatures. If someone's listening and looking for a challenge, take a mindful shower and see how often your mind is like, whoop, and you're like, oh, back to the water. And it's a great place because there's a lot of physical and sounds, and
that's a really good one. And to put a note, like, literally hang a note by your shower, and then every few days move it so you keep noticing it and it doesn't blend into the background. Can I challenge myself to shower in a more mindful way? And then, like, one of the things you can do, because sometimes people are like, well, what do I think about then? Like, what do I do? And you could do it like the mindful walking. You'd be like, I am washing my arm right now. And then you're just like washing, I am washing my back right now, like washing. And then you feel the sensations and you feel the warmth and the water against you. I'm washing my foot right now. And you just keep orienting to exactly what's happening. And then you're distracted, right? And you bring yourself back to whatever your senses are. And so you can literally orient yourself by your body parts, because it helps gives you something to concentrate on.
Totally.
And focus on. So yeah, that's a great idea.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jenn, for being on the show. I'm going to leave with this last question. I'm curious about if you could leave the Hive, our listeners here at Birds and Bees Podcast, with one takeaway message. What is the one thing that you would hope everyone here takes away from this episode? We
all have really uncomfortable patterns in us. around intimacy, emotional intimacy and sexual intimacy. And they'll be with us our entire lives, and they will interfere with what we most want, which is, I think, as humans, I think we're programmed to want this sense of vulnerable, authentic intimacy with other humans, where our armor's down, their armor's down, and we are seeing, accepting each other and all our beauty and all of our messiness. We all have armor and patterns that get in the way of being able to get to that depth of connection with others, and we'll have it till our deathbed. And so while it's uncomfortable to sit with these patterns and shine a bright light on them, it's invaluable in the long run. And you could be a 25-year-old and be like, oh, I don't want to do this. You don't do it now, you'll be 35 and 45 and 55 with the same patterns. They'll just be even more ingrained. But it doesn't matter what age you are. It's worth shining a light on these uncomfortable things in little ways of just chipping at it at the level that you're at and breathing through it and starting to build your comfort with this discomfort. It is amazing how your life will open up to you. And your relationships, intimate and otherwise, will have so much more meaning and depth to them. And it's hard, it's hard. And so be kind to yourself in the process.
Mm-hmm. It seems a lot like practicing an instrument or learning a new hobby. It takes practice and continual work at it, and then it becomes more a part of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jenn, for being with us on Birds and Bees podcast. It's been so awesome having you on.
My pleasure. Your questions were great. I really appreciated it.
Well, we'll have to have you on as the book comes out and as you continue to just do amazing things.
Thank you. Yes.
We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Wasn't that a great interview? Man, I love interviews like this. Remember, we love when you send these episodes to your friends and family. There's a good chance you know someone who could use some extra support or the information that was just discussed in this last episode. Send them a link, tell them about it. You can send it through iTunes, send them the birdsandbeespodcast.com link. Any way that best will get them the information, and it can help a lot to those that you love. We really appreciate you sharing this. Please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. That helps us immensely with getting this content out. And know that I love you. Love the fact that you guys are helping me out with my goal in sharing this information with the entire world and changing the way that we talk about sexual health and changing the interactions we have with our kids as well as our partners. If you have any questions or you want to join the conversation, send me a call or give me a text at 385-449-1818. Send me an email, birdsandbeespodcast@gmail.com. All this is going to be great. Love to hear from you, Hive mates. And I look forward to talking with you guys in the next episode. So until then, keep the sexual health buzz alive, and I'll see you in the next episode.